Hi, good evening.
Good evening, everybody. This is really nerve-wracking. I've talked to conferences with thousands of people, but when you can't see anybody and you can't get any body language back from them, it's really quite unnerving. So anyway, I hope you can all see the screen. I intend to I intend to talk for about 45 minutes, but those of you who know me well know I can talk for Britain. So John, please, will you start doing some signs if I'm going on for too long? Just tell you about this trip that we did last year, and if you've can I just thank you all for the distances that you have travelled to be here tonight. I really do appreciate you travelling. I mean, I know some of you have even come from the front room to be here tonight. Thank you very much for your commitment. And clearly, there's nothing decent on telly, and what a fantastic turnout. There's obviously nothing decent on telly. Thank God they did the comic relief last night. Although looking in at this, you might be thinking tonight is the night for the comic relief. Anyway, it's a trip around Ireland, so really it has to start with a jig, doesn't it? But we need a bit of nautical. So that's hopefully got a nautical, a sort of salty tang. Well, it's certainly got a salty tang going there. Your host tonight, and let's just see if I can get your host tonight is John, who's obviously part of the SCA now. Fantastic to have him, and not just because of a fantastic background, but great values, and he's just got personality to really make things happen. And I'm only here tonight because the so-and-so twisted my arm and told me to come. If you've signed up expecting huge amounts of excitement, I'm afraid the Olympics is as much as you're going to get tonight. We're three. I'm just describing a trip that three club paddlers did last year, and obviously it needs a bit of commitment and so on. But you know, on the east coast of Scotland, there's nothing interesting ever happens, is it? And all of our estuaries are just mud-filled ditches. So sometimes you have to travel a bit further afield. And I've been lucky enough. I've been paddling since I was about 22. I've been lucky enough to be able to paddle rivers, was what I used to do. But then I had to go on the sea because I was working in an English school and you couldn't get on the rivers, and so you know, I've been sea paddling for far too long. But I've been really lucky at being able to go on some amazing trips and paddled a few rivers well beyond Europe. But my interest in travelling, you know, my mother was quite a character. Took me overseas every summer to this foreign land, and here you go, real poverty, a completely short economy. So under military rule, political murders killed 400 people a year. I'm not joking. And roadblocks were constant. And it was subject to constant bombing. It was absolutely amazing as a teenager to go and watch this. This was Northern Ireland in the 1970s. And that bottom picture is the Europa Hotel, the most bombed building in Europe after the Second World War. That's it today. And there's something really special going on in Ireland. The whole of Ireland, not just the Éire, but the north and the south, and you know, there just is something special. They are pretty special people, but so are we. And one of the things I got from this trip was a real a sense of who we are here in Scotland, not just who they are there. Who you paddle with, if you're planning to go and paddle 1,000 miles around some pretty forbidding coastlines, you don't just want to have people that you can get on with. You want to have people who you really will trust, who you know can look after themselves, are pretty self-sufficient, who've got enough skill. But you know, the personal qualities are probably the most important thing. That kind of sort of grit, sort of determination, the prepare, you know, just being prepared to just grunt on. Because let's face it, sea canoeing's no fun at all. It's just grunt, paddling in the headwinds, misery. So Ritchie Diaper and I knew each other through Lothian Sea Kayak Club, and Rob Burgess, strong, silent borderer. And the great thing about strong, silent types is you can give them the heavy gear because they're strong, and they don't moan about carrying it because they're silent. And my own background, you know, it had included a first ascent up on the Tibetan border. A friend of mine, Pete Knowles, is a great river paddler, and there's so many of you listening to this who will have done very similar things. And I'm not really going to be able to tell you anything or show you anything that is that much different to what you've done already. But certainly, when you spend a month at the bottom of a kilometre deep gorge you don't really know if anybody's ever been down there before. It does teach you a wee bit about self-reliance. And but you know, whatever you do in this sport, there are amazing people who've been doing it for a hell of a lot longer and have done an awful lot of these things before. Brian Wilson has really blazed the trail, partly because of his skill in writing, and he's the only canoeing author that's ever been serialized in Radio 4, as far as I know. And you know, there are some amazing people. These two, John Hines and Sean Cahill, Irish paddlers, did a fantastic video, still up on YouTube. Go and watch it. It's a real tribute to the Irish paddling community, who are superb. You know, we do stand on the shoulders of giants, one of whom is this lad, Mick Amara, who's a force of nature. Fraser Gormall is a fantastic athlete, you know, but Mick took over winning the Liffey descent from him and then won it another 7 times, I think it is, and then paddled around Ireland one summer with his pals. A couple of English guys went and did it faster than him, so he went off after spinal surgery and did it in 23 days. But then there's Tom Thorpe, Scots lad who's working in Devon, who after we paddled around Ireland went off himself, paddled across it in the first place and went around it in 26 days. Quite remarkable. We weren't those sort of people. We came through there's 1980s paddling, and you know, an awful lot of people got into paddling because of what schools did, because of what youth groups did, what scouts did, boys brigade, and all the rest of it, and adults given of their time. That culture's changed, unfortunately, although clubs are really the backbone of this, and all of you are involved in clubs, and really, you know, I'm wearing the SCA shirt because I believe in it, because, you know, together we're doing some pretty special things. But lockdown has made us perhaps a bit more aware of things we took for granted, but we've got to help the freelance folk. There are people who've completely lost their living, people who've committed their living to canoeing, and we really must, every chance you get, folks, let's reach out to these people and do what we can, because they're part of us. You know, we're all in this together, and for some of them, they're really paying quite a price. But we're on the shoulder of giants, and when people paddled around, and one of my friends, Mike McDonald, took me off Wayfarer cruising. This is us taking wayfarers from Benmore Centre in Argyll prior to sailing around Skye and out across the Minch and out to the west side of the Hebrides in the centre boats. I don't think we'd get past the risk assessment these days. But Mike gave me lots of advice. He himself is quite a formidable expedition paddler. I didn't take all of his advice. That one we certainly didn't follow. And you know, when you do things like this lad, the risks are really clear. They're obvious and they're clear. But when you talk to people, these are a couple of West Country lads who paddled around Ireland a couple of years before us, and we talked to all the people who'd been around before and got a lot of really good advice. And there's no paddling that we did that was any more difficult than what we would have done in a Scottish summer trip. But the decisions and the judgment calls that you had to make, they really used it. The guy who crashed who saved that airplane on the Hudson River, he said for all his career of 30 years, he paid low deposits into the bank of experience. And in that one catastrophe, he withdrew all his experience and obviously saved 155 lives. Well, we needed probably all of our experience, but we had to use very little of our skill, to be quite honest. Andy Mullins, in the picture before, they said, look, listen, if you are going, seriously think about online, about blogs, and about, you know, they'd raised a lot of money. They'd paddled around Ireland, but they'd also paddled around Britain. They'd raised thousands of pounds for charities. And so we thought, right, we must do that. And Ritchie and Rob, very good IT people. So they set us up very nicely, got a website, got a means of getting money off people, and we decided, right, we will commit to this. We'll write a blog every night, assuming that we can get the phone signal. And then pretty much off we went. Pretty much the same as thing. We did commit. We did quite a lot of preparation, a lot of looking at the coastline, reading everything there was to be. We printed out maps of the entire Irish coastline. So if any of you are considering doing any other part of it, please get in touch. We've got electronic and paper information for every single nook and cranny of it. IT geeks are really good people for that. Ritchie entered every single waypoint he'd ever read about in any book or pilot, which is really useful. We were keen that we would leave from Larne, because Larne's a small port and you can get on the water. P&O sailed to Larne. Senna sailed to Belfast. Senna said, no problem getting your boats on. P&O said, sorry, you have to bring them on in the car. We did have a little tussle with them. However, once we got there on the ground, they were absolutely magnificent, and we just wheeled our boats on. We don't know how lucky we are with Caledonian McBrain folks and the Northlink ferries. There's never any problem with that. And here, they're not used to it, and so it took a bit longer to persuade them. But once they did, they were superb. So there we go. Nice little muddy ditch. Look at scenic Larne. Beautiful place, eh? During this presentation, there are a few video clips, and it's slightly clunky. I'll have to just collapse the presentation and put up the video clip, but I hope you can bear with it. And instead of showing you maps all the time, I've got a couple of fly-throughs from our GPS, which hopefully give you an idea of where we went. So there you go. Look at those three fresh-faced youths, aren't they? Aren't they wonderful? Yeah, three old men trying to wondering what we've let ourselves in for, wondering what we've let ourselves in for with each other. Each of us is quite a strong character, quite self-reliant, quite self-sufficient, and I think we were all worrying, how are we going to get on? Are we going to be okay? We decided that we would camp separately. That's the advice that we'd been given, and actually it proved to be brilliant. We shared tents when we wanted to, but it did give you just a little bit of space, and then 2 odd months of being together, we all appreciated it. So there we are, starting at Malin, and if I can just say one thing, I hope you can see this little arrow. Tides in Ireland, it's amazing. On the west coast, there's very little tide. The tide doesn't come up and down much, and it doesn't flow terribly fast, not compared to our coastline. But round the top, it floods around the top, fills the Irish Sea, and then up here. There's also a huge, south of Dublin, there's big shoals, big offshore shallows, which all have wind farms on. And the tide, when it ebbs, and this bit goes for 8 hours out of the 12, goes south. So getting your tides right, both coming in to the Irish Sea and leaving it, is quite important. We read numerous accounts of people coming ashore in the middle of the night in horrible, muddy, shallow beaches, and trying to paddle against tides and having to paddle overnight so they could catch favourable tidal flows. So we've done a bit of looking quite carefully at that, and there was a window of opportunity where we could get good, strong tides to help us south, and also good, strong ebb tides to help us down here. Scenic Larne, isn't it beautiful? We got out of there as quick as we could. So I'm now going to just get you down to this is a little fly through. That first stretch of coast is very shallow and completely full of muddy beaches and motorhome parks. Early on, we decided every pub lunch we could get, every pub meal we could get, we should take. A feature of the Ulster coast is these big inland lochs, Carlingford Loch and Strangford Loch, which is just past there. And these big, muddy, shallow bays. So as you can see, we cut them. Tide race gave us lent Rob a boat. So of course we lumbered him with the heavy steel trolley. Carlingford Loch and round to Giles Quay. So we were camping out of. Can you see that? Okay, John, give me a thumbs up if that's okay.
Yeah, I can see that great.
Camping out of the boats, just landing wherever we could, and we really were on a bit of a mission. We had decided not to take racing boats and wing paddles because we weren't really used to that. We had not done anything like as much time in those. I've got a couple of shoulder injuries, so I put a sail on because I was worried about repetitive strain, inflammation of joints, and that's another reason I didn't use a wing paddle, just to try and not do anything different, just do what I was used to. And this is us crossing Belfast Loch. All your road grit comes out off this quay, kilometre-long quay. Lovely scenic camping in laybys, and you got up and got the tide early doors, and this is us crossing the mountains of Mourne. But we knew Storm Hannah was coming, and so we were keen to get across Dundrum Bay, and we got across to Dundrum Bay and into a little place called Clocker Head. We landed in the harbour, and a local paddler drove 20 miles up. We got a GPS tracker on the website, and we found throughout our trip that people would look at that and come and meet us on the water and off the water. Well, Sean is a lifeboatman at Clocker Head, and he said, you've got a storm coming, you'll need somewhere to camp. We camped at the back of there, but he wasn't happy with that, and he basically just said, right, enough of that. You guys are going to camp in my back garden. They looked after us for 3 days. They didn't even realise we were raising money for the lifeboats, but just quite remarkable hospitality. Their unconditional kindness to strangers was just amazing. Here's another little bit of fly through for the bit of coast that takes us down to Dublin. The received wisdom is that the west coast is the hard stuff. It's the big exposed stuff. But actually, we knew from accounts that the East Coast really was something to be careful of. And we spent 2 weeks paddling into headwinds. We broke our trolley in Clocker Head. Sean took it away. His son welded it back together again. And so they didn't just feed us, they fixed us. I have to say, the other two were not particularly keen when I put the sail up. Didn't get a lot of bonding from them as I shot off into the distance with the wind powering it. This is us coming up to Howth Head and into Dublin Bay. Sean, the lifeboatman's day job was a pilot cutter driver. And that's us cross Dublin Bay, coming down the Wicklow coast, all of which is just beach, gravel, spit, an increasing amount of tide. This little bit of water is actually called the sluice, and it certainly is. We tried paddling against it, absolutely no point. And camping on beaches wherever we landed. So I hope you can all see that. I hope I'm not rushing things too much. We stopped at lifeboat stations, usually because they always offered you a cup of tea and a shower and so on. But this was one at Skerries on the east coast of Dublin. This is a chap called Kevin O'Sullivan, who was just one of the. He burst in the door and said, "Mick told me I had to find you guys." And he'd found us from the website. Kevin's a paddler, and Kevin's also an Aer Lingus pilot. So he works 4 days on and has 8 days off. So he spent 4 days flying his jet, 4 days paddling his Taran round Ireland and dumping it, and then 4 days with his family. And he was in the middle of paddling around Ireland, 4 days on, 8 days off, and we were to keep in touch with him because he always was on the phone telling you whose back garden you could camp in, or who was going to give you this, or who was going to do that. It's a fantastic network. And Sean, there's us in the middle of Ireland, Dublin Bay. We thought we'd just shoot straight across it, but we looked at the amount of commercial traffic. It's like an airport. So Sean drives a pilot boat. So Sean came over and saw us. There's the joys of the Wicklow coast, which is just one long shingle and loads of nesting birds. But, you know, they look after their grass there. They've got interesting ways of solving the same problems that everybody has. Mick Amara, who I knew pretty well by then, had sworn that we were not to pass Tramore, or he would come and drag us in physically. Now, when Brian Wilson went round Ireland, one of Mick's pals, Dermot, swam out to Brian and jumped on the back of his boat and dragged him in. Well, Mick paddled out to Gaze, but it was so windy that we paddled past each other in the middle of the bay. And Mick, fantastic. By then, I'd managed to hold my boat. Mick immediately took us into his house, his family, his heart. Ritchie's 56th birthday, baked a cake, and just wonderful people. Here's a little fly through, taking us from Hookhead, which is near where Mick lives, down to Valentia Island, which of course you've all heard of. Hookhead is a very prominent headland, and we're now heading southwest rather than south. Quite an interesting coastline. The Copper Coast. Look, beginning to get a bit rockier, but all the bays, fantastic big beaches. But we're beginning to come aware of the sea. Now that's the mouth of Cork, coming round to Old Head of Kinsale. This is Kinsale. This is the Old Head of Kinsale, shaped like a spoon. And now we're down on what they call West Cork. Hands were a problem, I have to say. And headland after headland. And then down into Baltimore, near the Fastnet, Cape Clear. Then round to Crookhaven, by hook or by crook, the two places you can get a square rigger into Ireland. And then round Mizzen Head, and then the first of what we call the long hops. There's 4 big open crossings that you have to do. Through to Dursey Island, and then across to Bullis Head, Puffin Island, and this is Valentia Island, famous from the old shipping forecasts. And if you just pause on that for a minute, you can see the effect that the mainland of Britain has on the Irish sea tides. By now, we were about 3 weeks in, and I have to say that what I'm doing here is really just a snapshot of the things. I am very happy once the restrictions are gone. I have a bus pass. I'll come and give this talk to any club, any place that's into the staffed enough to be interested at no cost. Might ask you to contribute to Medicine Sans Frontier, but basically, this is just a little snapshot, and you can see 3 weeks in, we're beginning to make some ground. You'll be glad to hear that's the last of the fly-throughs for a little bit. To go from Hook Head, we're paddling across. We're cutting a bay, about 3 or 4 miles offshore. And I noticed every hour we stopped, and we would have a short break. And on one of those, and actually talk to each other, which we didn't always do. And I noticed the paddler behind us. So this is Craig Keyworth, local paddler. And he said, he was really annoyed. He was saying, "Look, guys, you're paddling past the best bit of this coastline in Ireland. You know, you're paddling straight past it. That's terrible." We said, "Listen, well, guys, welcome to our world. When you're paddling around Ireland, you actually are paddling past it rather than to some of the amazing places. It's an amazing place to paddle. Scotland's pretty amazing, but I have to say, go and look at Ireland." Now this is a typical one. This is a typical, day paddling shot with the other two paddling upwind, because we're always paddling in a headwind. That's what sea canoeing is about. Basically, it's because I used to sing as I paddled along, and the other two would get as far ahead of me, so they didn't have to hear it. And this is us getting up near to Youghal Bay, and I actually knew a song about Youghal, and I'm going to share it with you now. "I'll tell you a story that happened to me one day as I went down to Youghal by the sea. The sun it was hot and the day it was warm. Says I, a quiet pint wouldn't do me no harm." Well, halfway across Youghal Bay next day, look behind, there's a couple of local paddlers, and what did they produce out of their cockpit? Bottles of beer named after the headlands we just paddled past, and fantastic. And they paddled with us for the rest of the day. Claire's a swimming instructor for disabled people. Tony asked Tony what he did, and he said, "Oh yeah, I'm a customs officer." There's an Irish customs officer. He brings alcohol out to boats instead of taking it off them. Absolutely brilliant. Fantastic people. We then were at the mouth. Roche's Point is the mouth of Cork, the inlet that Cork is at the end of. We had no intention of going anywhere near Cork. It's 40 kilometres inland, and we're beginning to notice it wasn't a headwind anymore. We got southeasterly winds, which should have been great. Should have been behind us, but it was beginning to. But we really beginning to notice the swell, and that's something we get here. Of course we do, but and the coast is beginning to get a little bit more forbidding. In fact, throughout this presentation, you'll not get any exciting pictures at all. Some of the most interesting shots to be had. We weren't equipped to take our hands off the paddles, or even operate remote control cameras. It just no chance. By now, after about 3 or 4 weeks, our hands were beginning to really pay. That's our hands after they healed. We had real problems. We just had to tape them up every day. We had really probably our most challenging day. Rob and I can remember going up the face of one wave, and we each said to each other, "Are you going to get back looped first, or am I?" However, we made it down to Kinsale Outdoor Centre, and that's John Hines there, who took us in, put us up in his centre. We couldn't get around to his house because it was on the other side of the head of Kinsale, and the sea was just far too big. John sat down with us for a couple of hours, went through every campsite that they'd been at when they paddled round. And I said, "Look, come on, you surely have got a home to go to. You need to get back home." And he said, yeah, I bet I had to. It's been a bit of a difficult time for us. John's wife had just been diagnosed with breast cancer, and there he is, giving his time to support us. When really he was worrying sick about his wife. However, she's responded fantastically well to the chemotherapy, and it's a fantastic outcome. But it just shows you the commitment that these Irish paddlers had to doing the best for you. They didn't come and tell you how great they were or how incredible things they had done. They came and talked about their fantastic coastline and helped you access it in every way that they possibly could. Got around to Castle Townsend. Down the bottom you see from the fly through a nice beautiful place. A chap called Jim Kennedy runs a great sea kayaking business out of there. And in Baltimore Bay next day, as we headed for yet another pub lunch, Jim paddled straight out and says, "You'll be the 3 Scottish boys," and reached in his boy and said, I had a €50 note, 50 quid basically, certainly is now, and said, "There you are, boys. That's to spend from raising your spirits for when you're absolutely fed up with the trip and fed up with each other. Get into a pub and use that to raise your spirits." So we pocketed it, and we waited for an opportunity to use it. That's the Fastnet Rock. We reckoned it looked like a mosque on the horizon, but that's one of the dilemmas of long distance paddling. Perfect day to get out there and paddle around it, but we knew we got these big open crossings to do. So what do? Do you go and have a trip around the rock, or do you try and get yourself into position and take advantage of the settled weather? These crossings down at the bottom, it's perfectly feasible to go around each headland and go up and into the many anchorages and sheltered spots, but they're all 40 or 50 kilometres deep. It's a day to get up and a day to get back out, and whatever weather stopped you going across would probably have changed for the worse by the time you got back out again. Mizzen Head is a real turning point. The tides change, the Atlantic tides meet the Irish Sea tides and all the rest of it. Big place. Fearsome stories about it. Oh, we'd read a lot about it. We were really, really geared up there, kitted up, bristling with electronic safety kit. Absolutely, pretty good weather. Looks okay. Looked right. 5-6 hour crossing. Can we do it? Yes, we can. Bob the Builder syndrome. So geared up, psyched up, went off round, and what do we see off Mizzen Head? A girl on a stand-up paddleboard. So there's Una, who was working her way up the west coast with her gear bungeed to her paddleboard. Fantastic. And she knew what she was doing. It's not the first time I felt overdressed and outclassed by a young lady. Great, fantastic American girl living on the west coast there. And she was going on. And every Coast Guard that we talked to, I said, how's Una doing? Did you see Una? They all knew where she was and what she was doing. Sea canoeing. That it's a bit miserable when you look at that and know that that's where you're going to spend the night, and it's going to take you 5 or 6 hours, and you just hope that the weather stays there. And 3 hours later, it's looking like this. Not much different. And I tell you, the mind games you play with yourself and with each other just to pass the time and just to keep it going. But we did, and everywhere on the Irish coast, there is a little slip and a harbour in a fantastic sheltered spot, and just the place you would want to be. There's a Scotch engineer in the 19th century built these all over the Irish coast. His name was Nimmo, and he obviously talked to local curragh fishermen. Ireland's got a long tradition of small boats fishing out of tiny places, and what we found right the way around the Irish coast was there were people living there, not just visiting there, though there were plenty then, but living there, fishing there, and we found there were pubs, shops, and 4G phone coverage. We got all sorts of precautions to, ways of making sure we could keep our phones charged and could get access to weather forecasts. We didn't need any of that because we could, we got absolutely could talk to anybody anywhere. 4G coverage significantly better than in Scotland. Next day in Dursey Island, we're heading off for Valentia, which is our next big hop. And this is Bolus Head, that's Valentia Island there. And that little lump out there, this tiny little lump, that's the closest we got to the skellies, these amazing rocks that stick out of the sea. We'd been warned that, whatever the sea was doing out there, that Clapotis was a real thing. And I'm going to just give you a little flavour. I had the camera mounted on my chest, and you can see this is what it's like off there. Hopefully I'll give you a slightly better... Once you're out in an ocean swell, and it doesn't matter how many miles offshore you are, it bounces off these amazing cliffs and comes straight back out again. The cliffs don't absorb much energy. They just reflect it straight out. And this gives you an idea. We're running with the wind behind us now. And you may be able to see this. That's both. I'm just going to hold it there. What we are doing, you can notice how few strokes we're putting in. really, because of the bounce back, you really just have to be careful that you don't take an air stroke or get caught unaware. So a lot of the time you're just sitting balancing. It's a little bit like riding a horse for those who've not done it. Although big, we were quite used to it by now, and swell had really intimidated us at first. But anyway, what we're doing is heading for Valentia Island here, and this is Puffin Island. We knew there was a sort of couple of 100-meter gap down there that we reckoned would probably in these conditions would be okay. And it was, although it was the reflected waves across it did make it quite an interesting little paddle. So anyway, let's get back to the pictures and having got through the gap, this is the Valentia coast, or the Kerry coast, just leading to Valentia. These cliffs are over 1,000 foot high, and they look like freshly dynamited quarries. And it was absolutely amazing Atlantic erosion. And that's looking back out to the southwest. That's the Skelligs away there. While we were there, nothing had been near the Skelligs, none of the visitor boats, none of that. Huge number of Star Wars fans queuing up to get out there. Now, in Ireland, all the interesting lumpy bits are around the edges. The middle's just field and bog, whereas in Scotland's the opposite. We've got all the lumpy bits, the rivers and everything. Mountains are in the middle. Now we're down here, and we're obviously we've made our big hops, but now we've got to get across the Kerry to the Dingle area, to the Blasket Islands, and then across the Shannon, and that's where we're headed for next. And I'm going to skip quite a bit of it. If you want to see all that, just email the SA and I'll come out and do it for you. We're heading up to here to where the Cliffs of Moher. The geology changes limestone and then granite. Father Ted's filmed up in the Aran Islands here, and this is us heading up Cliffs of Moher. Fantastic. We'd had a few days sheltering from weather, but got a most amazing calm for this next little bit. And I'm now going to switch. I'm going to jump. If I go back to the map, I'm going to leave out all of Connemara because time's short. But it's absolutely beautiful. It's like the Caribbean. It's got islands. It's got islets. It's got beaches, loads of places for any level of paddling. And we were basically just going to island hop and then nip up the chicken chute around Achill Island. And up here, if you get your tides right, you get spat out at 5 knots here. And then you go inside a thing called Achill, to the Belmullet, and into a thing called Broadhaven. And now you're into really wild, underpopulated Mayo. This is where the Spanish Armada came to grief. Absolutely remarkable place. Now, if you look behind me, there's a little sweatshirt Irish Sea Kayak Association run by a lad who's probably listening in just now. Actually, Chris McDade's Glaswegian. We'll forgive him that. Who lives in Ireland and had been fantastically helpful before and during the trip. And we holed up in here because of bad weather. And we knew that the North Mayo and the Donegal Bay were the next big tasks for us. So there's the Cliffs of Moher and then out into Broadhaven. Now, Chris has presided over some amazing paddling, but Chris said, excuse my language, but he said, if you don't keek your pants going through this gap between this island and the thing, you'll be fine. It's as bad as it's going to be out there. These stacks are called the Stags of Broadhaven, and they're 200 foot high. The scale's huge. So there, I thought I'd better put up a little tribute to Chris McDade, who does so much for IRC paddling, in the same way that a few people do here. People like Mike Buckley. Chris describes himself as a better looking version of Mike, which, well, I couldn't possibly comment other than to say yes. Chris also gave us hoodies. Now, at first we thought, we've got fully laden sea kayaks. The last thing we want is a hoodie to stuff in these, but actually they were incredibly useful. He also took us all over the place so we could suss things out. This is down Patrick Head, and that's what it looks like. This is Ireland's longest sea tunnel. It goes 800-meter long tunnel. Fantastic. This is what it looked, and we passed it the next day at 4 a.m. We didn't go through it then; it was too dark. What we were doing was we were hoping to get to Donegal by crossing Donegal Bay in a monster hop of about 10 hours. Weather wasn't that promising. We talked to Chris. He reckoned maybe he could, maybe there's a window. Well, we went through the window, and about 2 hours out, we reckoned the window was getting slammed shut on us as we were bracing, paddling at 4 or 5 strokes and having to brace again. We thought, I don't think we can do this for 6 or 7 hours more. And the cliffs on the other side are even higher than anything we've been on. So we turned back. And a few days later, we just worked our way along the coast. And it's surfing country, Iski, fantastic bays. I'm cutting this short because I've been talking for long enough. It's 40 minutes gone already. In the middle of that bit of Donegal Bay, there's a little island called Inishmurray, and it's an amazing place. Completely featureless. It's got a ruined village. It's got a real feel of St Kilda about it. Those who've been out onto Herta will recognise what it feels like. You've got a real strong sense of who used to live there. In fact, they painted their names on the doorways before they left, and every year people go out and touch up the paint. But they weren't the last people to leave there. St Columba was exiled from the monastery here, 600 AD. He was exiled from this. Beehive cells. We had a wee look inside them, and I tell you, this Celtic monastic life, it's almost as dreich as sea canoeing. Now, we were heading across to Slieve League, 2,500 foot cliffs that roll straight down into the sea. But it's pretty, and I have to say, we weren't getting the best of weather, and this is what it's like. We're looking at these 2,500 foot cliffs, which are over here, and we've been paddling for hours, just miserable, raining. Nobody. It's blowing too much to talk to each other. It's just dreich, and I'll give you misery. Sport for all. Don't do sea canoeing. We were heading for a little place called Teelan, where there's a fantastic natural harbour, and I'd been there before, and I'd paddled this next stretch of coast before, and I knew that Teelan was a great place. You could get in there, and we happened in there, and we met some powerboaters, many of whom we'd bumped into on the other side of the coast, and they'd say, you'll have to come up to the pub. There's a pub about an hour. We'd also bumped into a local sightseeing skipper, and he just handed us the keys to his van and said, there you go, boys, you'll be wanting to get some shopping. There's a pub just up the road. And fantastic. And we know that he does that for just about everybody who comes anywhere near him. Paddy Byrne, fantastic. So we found our way to the pub, and the local fisherman immediately said, right, drove us back to our camp, collected all our washing, took it back to his house, put it in, and then took us back to the pub, guaranteed that he'd be back by closing time with the dry washing. In the meantime, the girl managing the pub said, right, boys, your dinner's ready. I said, no, it's okay, we hadn't ordered any food. Yes. And they insisted on feeding us. And so we spent four nights there in the end with some very bad weather. And in the end, they gave us free accommodation. Absolutely fantastic. I can't actually tell you very much. I can't tell you very much about that little section, because everything you've heard about Irish pub culture is true. And it is also true that if you can remember what was going on, you weren't there. This is 4 o'clock in the morning. Now, I hold a music degree. I've since sent it back. I'm obviously singing with great conviction. The words are, I don't look good naked anymore, and I'm sure that I'm not the only one that applies to. We then set off out round through Donegal, and again, I'm not going to show very many pictures of it because you can't do 1,000 miles in an hour. The next stretch after Donegal, the next stretch was just continuous cliffs and then a series of headlands. And once we got around the bloody foreland, we were just setting off to go around the bloody foreland, and we looked at some pretty dirty clouds and thought, nah, we'll maybe just set this one out in that island over there. So we went over to the island, sat the little storm out, and just as when we got back in the water, about half a mile offshore, suddenly it was as though somebody was firing shells at us. There was lightning overhead, striking the water. You've never seen 3 people scuttle across the water. John, we're probably even faster than you. So chickened out round the headland, and then it was, at that point, we were beginning to worry about time. Ritchie and I, we didn't have to worry. We both retired. Rob had taken leave of absence, and he was beginning to run out of time. And we seriously thought, we're just not going to manage this. We're just not going to get around in time. And then we had a couple of days where we just managed to get after headland after headland. This is Hornhead, and we came round Malin Head, and this is Katrina Woods, who we'd teamed up with a couple of times. I organised Freya Hoffmeister to give a talk here, and Katrina had paddled with her in America and all that. Katrina's the Mrs. Doyle of Irish sea kayaking. Wherever you are, she'll appear with a shed load of food and drink. Say, now, go on, you can fit it in, you will eat it. We arrived at the other side of Malin Head, and Katrina's there on the beach with a full carry-out of hamburgers and chips and the drink, which we wolfed. She and her partner went off paddling, which is just as well, because we'd already organised for a friend of mine to come up, fetch us and take us home to a slap-up dinner, which of course we did. Local farmer moved his cows out, stuck the boats in the byre on the beach, and we joined with one of my friends who lives down at a place called Moville in a show in sea kayaking there. Adrian Harkin that runs fantastic business out of there. They give us fantastic advice, including the kind of thing we were cowering under Malin Head, looking at these appalling tide races and thinking we'll never get through that. Ring Adrian, he says, yeah, it gets a bit dirty, but just go a wee bit to the left for a couple of miles and you'll be fine. And he was absolutely right. Saved us 4 hours and allowed us to get a huge day done with tidal help. And now we've paddled across the Foyle, and we're into Ulster. And you think, oh, that's the end of all the nice hospitality and the lovely people. Not at all. Not at all. Wonderful people. We phoned from there. I'd wolfed a massive breakfast at Siobhan's place, and then. And then wolfed another one in the Southern Club and Dundrum. We phoned the guy because the Irish kayakers have a bothy on the north coast there, and Robin Ruddock said, "Oh, that's fine, but listen, guys, I can't talk to you just now. I can't give you the combination to it until I've anchored this boat." I said, "Where are you?" He said, "Well, I'm in the same harbour as us." So he appeared. And he said, "Oh, by the way, if you want to go a bit further, I own a boathouse a bit further round." So that's exactly what we did. And round the Causeway coast, there's the Giant's Causeway. Now, it's a World Heritage Site, but I tell you, it's nothing compared to Fingal's Cave, really. And that's Ulster's World Heritage Site, and you can see all the tourists there, and there's buses going up and down. Nothing very special, really, and we were a bit smug as we were entering the corner. But by God, the bits you can't walk to, absolutely staggering. That mile after mile of basalt coastline, and just superb. And now we're beginning to. Now we're heading east. We're heading east, and the land we can see. This is Rathlin Island. We're nearly done. This is the boathouses. Robin Ruddock, who's another one of these pivotal characters in Irish sea paddling, who said, "Well, if you want your boathouse, just give me time to get changed, and I'll come down tonight and meet you there." And it was an absolute Aladdin's cave, wood-burning stove, beds, cooker, boats hanging in the ceiling. Absolutely fantastic place. It even had a Game of Thrones script in one of the drawers because the place is used as a location there. And you just stepped out of your boat and stepped into the boathouse, right beside the Carrick-a-Reid rope bridge, which we paddled under. And suddenly, 2 months of paddling is almost over. and this is Fairhead, and the land we're looking at here is Kintyre, and we're coming onto what they call the conveyor. If you get the tides right here, if the weather lets you, the tides roar around the top, and give you a real help. So we set off from Robin's boathouse, thinking, well, we've got another 3 days of paddling distance terms, and we roared down in a day to just in front of Larne, and we arrived back in Larne. And scenic old Larne. We arrived back at the scabby motorboat club that we'd left. We'd taken one trolley with us and left the other two. And there is a story with that, but we cursed them because when we got there, Ritchie's trolley was there, but mine had disappeared. However, the three of us, very sort of Edwardian handshake. Well done, chaps. Well done. Good show. Good show. Very satisfied to have done it. I knew that if I hadn't done it by that date, that certain parts of my anatomy were going to be removed if I didn't get back to my youngest daughter's graduation. Fortunately, I had made it with all sorts of things intact, and also with these strong friendships with two really remarkable guys who had been a real support. You know, when you're under pressure, as you inevitably are on a trip like that, it's you know, you really depend on other people to sustain not just your spirits, but your resolve. And we didn't do anything that was remarkable. Dozens of people paddle around Ireland every year. The people who did it in the 80s, like Brian Wilson, and did it before then, some of you have been paddling for a lot longer than me even. You were real pioneers. It was equivalent to climbing the Eiger then. Now, with the kits and the communications, it's a very much easier prospect. And I'd strongly advise you to go and paddle in Ireland. It is quite remarkable. Remarkable people, remarkable communities. But it did give me a strong feeling of, do you know, Scottish paddlers are no different. We're just a bit more buttoned up, and we're a bit more far-flung, and our country's a bit wilder, and we don't have quite so many strong coastal communities and the same links of small groups of people who work together regularly. But actually, we do have that. And you know, we should be very proud of what we have. But by God, seeing how the Irish went about it was just an amazing experience. Now I'm going to give you a fly through, just, you know, another one of these clips, just to have a wee look through at the final thing, and then if anybody's got any questions on, you're very welcome. Let's. These are the Blasket Islands, and round to a place called Brandon, with a pub right beside the harbour. Then over to Loop Head, which we chickened out of, quite a serious place that. But it has a pub. And then up this coast, which is only one landing place, which is what we're pointing to. And then over Cliffs of Moher, and in amazing conditions across to the Iron Islands. And Connemara. Sline Head, one of the most serious headlands there is. Inishturk, Clare Island, up Achill Sound, up by Belmullet, Little Canal, into North Mayo, Broadhaven, and the North Mayo Cliffs, which are just superb. Yep, turning back at Donegal, going up, out past Sligo to Inishmurray, Teelan, pub. Around the Sleeve League and Sleeve Toohey Cliffs, up past the other Aran Island, around the Bloody Foreland, That's Tory Island in front there. Melmore, Fanad Head, Dunaff Head, Dunaff Head, and then Malin Head, and then all the way around Inishowen, cross into Ulster, second breakfast. Robin's Boathouse. And then a day's paddle back to Larne. Now, oops, sorry, I'm fiddling there. When we got onto the ferry, we found one of the lifeboatmen from Clocker Head was the first mate, so he even let us drive his boat, and free food and drink and all the rest of it. People were amazingly generous. We raised over £5,000 on our trip, split equally between Medicine Sans Frontier and the RNLI. I know people like numbers. Well, here's a few of our vital statistics. 52 days, 40 of which were paddling. People have done it much faster than that. We had 12 days off for weather. The blogs really, we had tremendous dialogue with all sorts of people. People used to come up, take a photograph of the website on the stickers on the boat, and you'd see a donation go in that night. We did visit every pub we possibly could, for very good logistical reasons. It meant we didn't have to buy food, didn't have to buy gas or take time off the water to go shopping. So we kind of felt we had to drink the Guinness while we were there. But in spite of our efforts, we managed to lose 7 kilograms weight each of us. I have to say, fantastic experience. And whether you did it for a week or as we did for 2 odd months, it's a place to go, and they have so much in common with us, and yet they have their unique character. So that is the end of this. 3 young men in boats, and the website's still up there, so if you want to give anything, just go and visit us, 3meninboats.com, and I'll happily answer any questions if I haven't bored the backside off you. That's us done. 56 minutes.
Amazing, thanks, David. 56 minutes. Your voice is still going strong. Crikey, that was fantastic. What possibly the best way to lose 7 kilos I can imagine. So we've got some questions coming already. Anyone that's had any kind of anything they're curious about off the back of that, if you could just start typing questions into the Q&A chat. I'm just going to kick you off with a question from Ken. Ken's a sprint paddler background and also performance scientist that used to work with me way back in the day, and he's obviously got a taste for adventure now. His question's great, actually. It's, what was your highlight for the trip? Was it the adventure, the challenge, escapism, or something else?
It's one that I'll probably give the kind of rubbish answer that Matt Hancock's been given of late. Basically, it's the place and the people, which is a bit of a no answer. The coastline is absolutely stunning. It is absolutely stunning, very committing, but it's on a scale that, I mean, I've been to St Kilda, I've paddled most of Scotland. It's on a scale that, I mean, the highest cliffs in St Kilda are 1,500 feet. Slieve League is 2,500. So, and remarkable. It's got everything. Islands, but the people, their unashamed sort of commitment to being themselves. Although they're very clued up in technology and everything, they just know how to engage with other people. They're quite happy to be themselves, and they're famous for partying, but their unconditional kindness to strangers is just quite remarkable. We walked up to an old guy who was cutting his lawn in a very remote place, and he said, "Listen, we don't want to offend anybody, but would you mind is there somewhere that we could camp that isn't a field?" And he said, "Well, what's wrong with this?" Pointed to his lawn directly underneath his window. Said, "What's wrong with that? So you're a bit proud?" Oh no, you just come in here, knocked on the door, an old woman saying, "What do you want water for? Just come in and sleep. I've got beds." A kind of, and it's not old-fashioned. It's just an unconditional, confident kindness. So the place and the people.
And was that a surprise? I guess you wouldn't have known what to expect, or did you have an inkling?
My mum's from Dublin, and I'd been over. I knew what the Irish were like, and there's a dark side to the Irish character as well. As Chris McDade says, the Irish didn't take some of the imperialism lying down. They fought back hard, and they fought particularly hard for other things during the Troubles. But there's I was amazed at how confident and how vibrant the place was, because the place I saw in my teens was a poor place, and there are parts of Ireland that still are poor, but actually, they're very enterprising. There's a real vibrancy about it. They have new industries, and there are places that really are not doing well, and they must be really struggling, particularly in this lockdown. But they just have a sense of community. They still live around the edges. Even if half the houses are owned by people who live in Dublin, they come back every weekend quite routinely. And maybe I went there in the summer, spring. Maybe you're only seeing people on holiday, but actually the people who took us in were people who lived there and people who worked there. The people who washed our clothes were fishermen who knew what it was like to be in a smelly boat with smelly gear. So I was surprised by the degree of it. And also, I tell you, the Irish paddlers, they're just really committed to the paddling, and just as well with some of these westerly swells, you can't be anything but they just get out and do it.
Yeah, it looks fearsome out there. That probably brings us on to a question from Ray Kane. How many swims or capsizes did you have, if any?
Well, it's funny on that trip that we did in the Himalayas, that I did in the Himalayas in Sara, paddling, first descent of a class 4 or 5 Himalayan river. We never swam or rolled once, and because we couldn't, because if you lost your boat, you lost everything, and you'd probably have died because of the climate and the location. So and it's pretty much the same sea paddling there. You cannot afford. You can't. That's why I say there are places that you just have to. If you try to come ashore on some of the surf beaches, well, the surfers would kill you, even if the surf didn't kill you. And by the way, the surf probably would kill you. We didn't, probably. I'm pretty pragmatic. I'm not prepared to risk much more than injury, and we were careful. And it took us 52 days. And other people will have gone around it much quicker, and perhaps had a few things, because it didn't matter how careful your judgment. There were days when you were really gnarly, and I found myself giving myself a real good talking to, saying, relax, stop it. I'm a great believer, if you leave a seaboat empty, it doesn't capsize. So if you go in, it's your own stupid fault. So relax, just get your shoulders down, relax your hips, ride it, and you will cope. So there were times when, so we had one swim. Ritchie, I don't know if you're listening, but Ritchie had one swim, but that was very early on, because he was prattling about in surf in amongst shallow boulders. He just disappeared off and had a wee surf and got it wrong and didn't roll up because it was too shallow. And he just jumped into the boat. Cowboy rescued himself and paddled back off out and said, "I've just swum." So we were a bit silent for the next hour. This is a bit of thoughts thinking, I wonder. But actually, I tell you, there was the first day that we hit really big stuff. I just looked at the other two and thought, thank goodness I'm with them, because they really, they're nowhere near bracing, never mind capsizing. So no, We didn't. We did. We didn't. I have to say the boat did a lot of homework on boats. I think I've tried every single sea boat that exists. Did a lot of homework. Andy Warrender, who came to my talk last month, Andy Warrender had said he'd gone around Tasmania with Pete Goss. It's a sailing legend, but not as a proficient paddler. He said, "Yeah, I went around Tasmania with Pete Goss in a Curtin Sea Trek." Andy was in his Nordcap, and he said, "Sea Trek's a really, really annoying boat." He said, "I'm bracing away, trying to stay upright, and Pete is sitting in this Sea Trek, fiddling with his GPS." So I took a Sea Trek, fantastic boat, absolutely wonderful boat, lovely to paddle, very fast, but amazingly very, very stable, to the point where I could go to loo in the boat without even thinking about capsizing. That's an didn't want.
It's a good bit of sea kayaking advice there, I'd say. We've got a comment from Chris McDade was on the call. He's saying not so much a question, but immensely proud of the Irish sea kayaking community and delighted to have assisted you guys on the journey. I guess you've done a great sales job for paddling in Ireland today. For just speaking for myself, thought getting out there, seeing that coast.
While you're talking about Chris McDade, his friend Jane Egan, who's a para-athlete, the two of them, came and took us for a bar supper, and then Chris appeared several days on the trot. The most dangerous part of the trip, the most life-threatening moment, was stepping into Jane's BMW and being driven down the single-track lanes at 60 miles an hour with a big wall on either side. And Chris, I hope you can see that I've got the Irish Sea Kayaking sweatshirt behind me.
Nice. He's actually got a follow-up question. Obviously, from someone that knows that coast, which part of the journey did you find the most committing and remote?
Well, I'd paddled a couple of years ago around from Teelin to the Bloody Foreland. So the Sleeve League bit. I've got loads of bits of video that I haven't shown, but the Sleeve League stretch just round by the Stacks, where they go climbing near Port Donegal, that's got there's some difficult bits there if you go too close in, but we didn't. We just stayed well offshore. Bolus Head, and they'd warned us well that Bolus Head was really bad for Clopotis, and just seems to be in the place. But actually, the most intimidating bit was going from Roche's Point to Old Head of Kinsale. The sea there was short and steep, and because it was a southeasterly swell, about 4 meter swell, and it just reflected back and came bounding right back out at you, and was very, very peaky. So actually, the Cork coast was I would say gave us the most challenging seas. But there's extended places where you just simply cannot land, and the cliffs are absolutely. Yachtsmen are very nervous going around this coast, and in some ways kayaks really do suit it fantastically well. And I have to take my hat off to the people who did it 20, 30 years ago for the first time. They didn't really know half as much about it as we did. We got access to all sorts of information that they didn't have, and they were doing it in kit they'd made. People like Lofty Wright. I don't know if Heather's watching this. Lofty, in the 50s and 60s, paddling around in a boat he'd made himself. Amazing.
Absolutely. That kind of choppy, reflecting water also saps your energy, I guess, and those are the moments where you're getting tired, you think there's that chance of making a mistake. Did you get close to any days where you literally weren't finding somewhere to land or camp and you were running out of time, out of light?
We were having done a lot of river paddling. I know that you should always stop one eddy before one eddy, the second last eddy, not the last eddy. So we'd done a lot of homework. Ritchie had put in waypoints for every single possible landing place on the Irish coast. And he's very happy to share them with anybody. And Rob and I had laminated copies of maps of the 1 to 50,000 topo maps, which are very good, at least as good as the Ordnance Survey. We'd worked it out, and one of our rules was that you never went to bed without having done the next day's planning. And partly to stop you arguing with each other, because it's about where you're going to go and where you're going to stop. So you had a clear plan. But there were times when you're thinking, God, I'm never going to get there. I'm never going to get there. But it's amazing what. But you do, and obviously we were fit. We had trained. We had done a lot of paddling, in distance terms. Although we'd done almost no paddling together. Until we all three met together. I'd paddled with each of the other two quite a lot, but as a threesome, not.
Okay, I didn't realise that. So was the overall team dynamic fortunately worked though?
Yeah, there were times when we shouted at each other and were really annoyed, and there were usually to do when we didn't follow some of the simple ground rules. We'd met quite a lot and set a few ground rules. When three canoes set off for a distant point, you can't have three people each sure that the course they're on is the right one, because you end up literally miles and miles apart. And we'd said for any crossings that we would do it in hour legs and gather together at the end of that hour, and that we should never be out of shouting distance from each other. We didn't stick to that, but we intended to. And that one person would be in charge of the crossing, would be the captain, crossing captain, so that you stuck with them. And if they were getting it wrong, you'd tell them. You'd tell them that they thought it was wrong, rather than just quietly going off on what you thought was a better line. Because on those kind of distances, doing open crossings of 6-7 hours, you can get a long way off track.
Oh, absolutely, I can't quite get my head around that kind of length of time spent paddling. We've got a question from Roy Kane, which so Roy is Irish kayaker and paddler, out without much sea kayaking experience, but pretty keen to do the same trip in a few years' time. So he's obviously keen on getting out there on his own coast. His question was follow up from you mentioning how stable your boat was, and it's and how did you pee when on the water? Serious question.
How did I take a leak?
How did you take a leak without? If you can answer it without being too graphic. I guess it's long distance paddling technique, I imagine.
Well, we all had our own approaches. I basically had an old litre bottle, basically a bedpan. I had an old litre milk container. I just chopped the neck off, which was a mistake because the edges are quite sharp. You have to watch. But basically, we used spray decks with bail holes in them, because if you do have to get back in a boat, getting the water out is the real issue. Not getting back in the boat, but getting the water out. So basically, dry bottoms with a zip. You just peed in the bottle, reached in, emptied it out over the side. In fact, there was one time in a very crowded marina, I was absolutely bursting, and I just sat there with a spray deck on, completely relieved. Paddled outside the harbour mouth and disposed of it. It's the others. Rob's tactic was, he said, you just man up and hold on to it. So he clearly he's not got any prostate problems. And Ritchie said, I just pee in the boat and the electric pump takes it away. So
that's what that's for. Follow-up question on that: your nutrition and hydration and all that kind of stuff. You obviously had some pretty good pub meals in between, but there's still a lot of other fueling and eating to be done. What was your approach to that?
Well, and it's tied up with the approach to sleeping and camping. We talked quite. Jeff Cater and Andy Mullins, who were the two Cornish guys. Jeff Cater is now one of the directors of Sea Kayak Cornwall. We talked to them, and they both work in the NHS, and and they'd got dietitians to give them some advice. And what they found was that the advice they'd given was, look, take some energy gels, and just before you're coming off the water, eat them. Soak them in. Take hundreds of them, literally hundreds, and soak them in so that when you're getting off the water, you get a buzz of energy and you're not getting cold and fed up. Well, I tried that on a couple of trips and actually hated it. We looked at it and Ritchie was very minimalist. He had split barley, ouzo pasta, and stock cubes, and basically he threw all that into a meal flask, put a pint of water in the morning, and that's what he had for lunch every lunchtime. And he had dried stuff. He had he would have a soup packet and pasta flavored with a stock cube at night. So once we heard that's what his plans were, Rob and I said, stuff that for Game of Soldiers. We're not eating like that. We did eat a lot of pasta and those sort of things, but we just cooked for ourselves. I probably did the most cooking. I would be frying onions and doing it helped fill time ashore. And Rob did a lot of pasta and sauces, and we carried dried expedition food, and in the boat at any one time we needed a week's food. We reckoned we should have a week's food, and 2 days of water. So the boats were really quite heavy because we had things like 10 litres of water on, because if you get stuck on some little cove that you can't get out of, and you can't get ashore, you can't get inland from, then you need to have that. So we had these things, and we none of us touched any of them. I've still got them downstairs. So these sort of expedition specialist food that costs a fortune, a tenner a meal, didn't use it, and ate quite normally. Quite a lot of things like tinned fish at lunchtime, and or if we're particularly on the East Coast, if we could find a pub, straight in and get a full meal, because it meant you got bags of energy towards the end of the afternoon and could keep the speed up. It's quite noticeable that on our fly-throughs we could see the track, and the little hour gaps, you can see the wiggle in the line, and these gaps didn't get closer together as the day went on, which you would have expected. So we managed to keep up a steady rate of paddling, maybe because we're pretty slow all the time anyway.
Slow and steady wins the race. And what were your longest days like? You obviously mentioned how far you were kind of going on average, but what were your longest in terms of the mileage? You got some pretty fast ones on the conveyor towards the end, but also just in terms of hours on the seat.
One of our longest days was we went from Brandon Creek, which is on Kerry, on Dingle, and going straight across to the Shannon, right across the loop head. And that, in distance terms, that wasn't huge. It was about 50 kilometres. But we got up at 4 a.m. in the lashing rain, and the local drunk who we'd spent the night in the pub with was still up, fleeing. And he'd be picking up our flares and saying, "How does this work, boys?" and hitting it and saying, "Yeah." And there's nothing you want at 4 a.m, like a friendly alcoholic, fully stoked up, picking your gear out of your hatch as you're stowing it. But that was the longest day, because that's how it started. And then it's very windy to begin with, and then it got really sunny. And in fact, Ritchie and I both fell, near as damn it, fell asleep in the shipping lane, just because we're just nodding off. Some of the days were 60 kilometres, others were much shorter, 25, 30 kilometres into stiff force 5, and you were battering away for 10 hours, sometimes 8 hours. Tended to get up early, 10 by 10. If we get 10 miles by 10 o'clock, we were happy. 10 kilometres by 10 o'clock was pretty routine, and we got pretty attuned to just getting up, and sometimes you just, for the weather, if the wind wasn't flapping the 10, you'd be up saying, "Come on guys, come on, the wind stopped, right, let's get going." And there'd be that appalling hour in the morning where you have to get up, get something into you, and get it all into the boat. Misery.
And there wasn't anyone that was particularly hard to get going in the morning. You were all you were all happy to do that.
Well, no, there was nobody at all, but it's a good job that Rob and Ritchie are not there to tell you otherwise.
I think we might have Rob on the line, so if he wants to, if he wants to speak, he can come in and contradict you.
Yeah, but I actually people that it was something to really admire. The sort of tenacity, just the sheer stickability that 4 o'clock in the morning, right? Let's get up, let's get on with it, and it's there was never. We'd have the odd tussle about about sticking together or what we should have been doing, and what line we're taking, but whenever that was that was done and dusted, even if it had been heated, they were fantastic. We just got on with it, and we remain on excellent terms, which is not always the case, actually, I have to say, and in long trips.
No, I can imagine on these kind of expeditions, it's far more common for people to go their separate ways for quite a long time afterwards. So, it sounds like you set out for it to be that enjoyable experience, and it was. Look, I'm massively impressed and inspired by everything you've talked to us about today. Kind of coming towards the end of the questions, and we've done an hour and a half there on the screen talking at a computer. So I think it's time to call it a night. It's a big thank you from me. Anyone that wants to have any comments, just chuck that into the web chat now, and I'll leave the last word to you, David.
Well, basically, it's a hard time just now. It's particularly hard for people who are self-employed and, in our Canadian community, and they're very much a really important part of it. Please keep an eye out for our freelancers, and when you can, use them if you possibly can, because schools, youth groups, they used to introduce people to paddling. That kind of stuff has shifted. There's some fantastic people still doing it, but an army of freelancers and one-person businesses do fill that gap, and there are people. They came through us. They're qualified through the SAA. They're part of our clubs and communities. So we really, I would say, please, wherever you can, do something so we can keep our vibrant Scottish canoe community intact through this. And the Scottish Canadian community, having seen the Irish one, which is really impressive, the Scottish one is brilliant. It is brilliant. We're just a bit quieter and a bit more withdrawn.
No, great words. Couldn't agree more with that. I've been experiencing the friendliness of that community since arriving here. So I hope you enjoyed that. We're going to look to run more things along this line. Hopefully stuff across the breadth of paddle sports, so various different topics, various different types of paddle sports. If there's anything you specifically want to hear about, do let us know, and come along and support it. And yeah, the last thing, hopefully we'll see you on the water all again sometime very soon. So that's it for me. Good night.
Right, good night and thank you.